Episode 57, Fraterville Mine Disaster. Hey y'all, I'm Heather, and this is Poison Appalachia, the dark side of Appalachia. As always, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed last week's episode on haunted South Carolina. Now I have some more places I'd like to see. I'm enjoying these haunted state series. Next one's North Carolina, so that's one of my favorite states, so that one should be fun. But today's episode is another mine disaster. I know it seems like there's a lot of mine disasters, but as I said, Appalachia, coal is king, and there's a lot of mining in Appalachia, and there's bound to be disasters. This one is, I think, really sad. A friend sent me an article about it, and I just thought it was interesting, and I wanted to share it before I forget about it. So, this episode is the Fraterville mine disaster. The Fraterville mine disaster was a coal mine explosion that occurred on May 19, 1902, near the community of Fraterville in the U.S. state of Tennessee. Official records state that 216 miners died as a result of the explosion from either its initial blast or the after effects, making it the worst mine disaster in the United States history at that time, and it remains one of the worst disasters in mining history and the worst disaster in Tennessee. However, locals claim that the true number of deaths is even greater than that because many miners were unregistered and multiple bodies were not identified. Like I said, as you know, you can't have Appalachia without coal mines. They're our lifeblood, for better or for worse. So many people over the years have died in mines, and due to mines because of the mines. There's 1,000 reasons, but it all comes down to the fact that mining is dangerous work. The Fraterville mine was one of several mines located in the coal-rich Cumberland Mountains of western Anderson County, Tennessee. The mine and its namesake community were situated near the heart of Coal Creek Valley, a narrow north-south oriented valley slicing between Walden Ridge to the east and Val Mountain to the west. Tennessee State Route 116 connects Fraterville with Bryceville to the south and Rocky Top to the north. This stretch of Route 16 has been named Fraterville Miners Memorial Highway in honor of the victims of the mining explosion. Also, you don't know how hard I want to burst out into song singing Rocky Top, Tennessee, but I won't. But Anderson County is a county in the state of Tennessee. It's located in the northern part of the state, in eastern Tennessee. Anderson County is included in the Knoxville, Tennessee metropolitan statistical area. Just a little bit more about Anderson County's history. The construction of Norris Dam, the first dam built by the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, brought major changes to the county in the 1930s. Approximately 2,900 families were relocated from reservoir lands in Anderson and nearby counties during the construction, which began in 1933 and was completed in 1936. During World War II, the federal government's Manhattan Project brought more change to the county, including displacement of more families and the founding of Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And of course, the Fraterville mining disaster. So let's get back to that. The Coal Creek Company, organized by Knoxville businessman E.C. Camp, began work at the Fraterville mine in 1870. Coal Creek Coal developed a reputation for fair contracts and fair pay, and the company's Fraterville mine was considered one of the safest in the region. The company never took part in the state's controversial convict leasing system and paid in cash rather than scrip, and thus avoided much of the labor unrest that plagued neighboring mines during the Coal Creek War in the early 1890s. I've done a couple mine episodes, and I don't really think I've ever mentioned what scrip is. I'm sure a lot of people know about it, but maybe some of you don't, so let's just go off on a side note here for a minute. Company scrip is a substitute for government-issued legal tender or currency issued by a company to pay its employees. It can only be exchanged in company stores owned by employers. In the UK, such truck systems have long been formally outlawed under the Truck Acts. In the United States, payment in scrip became illegal in 1938 as part of the Fair Labor Standards Act. In the United States, mining and logging camps were typically created, owned, and operated by a single company. These locations, some quite remote, were often cash poor. Even the ones that were not, workers paid in scrip had little choice but to purchase goods at a company store, as exchange into currency, if even available, would exhaust some of the value via the exchange fee. With this economic monopoly, the employer would place large markups on goods, making workers dependent on the company, thus enforcing employee loyalty. While scrip was not exclusive to the coal industry, an estimated 75% of all scrip was used by coal companies in Kentucky, Virginia, and West Virginia. The use of coal script dates back to the late 1800s as coal companies looked for a way to increase their profits, although the stated reason for using script was to eliminate keeping large cash reserves. Sure. Rather than receiving compensation in the United States currency, many miners received payment entirely in script, which could be used only at store owned by the coal company, called a company store. Coal companies would also advance miners their wages in script, but would pay them from 50 to 80% of their wages for such advances, a form of early payday loans. The result was a situation in which miners were perpetually in debt to their employer, receiving only an advance against unearned wages. Moreover, because the company store was often the only place to spend script, the company would charge exorbitant fees in these rural communities compared to prices in major cities. So basically, they pay you monopoly money that you can only use at their stores, and then they can charge whatever they want to in these stores because there's nothing you can do about it. And then they can charge you whatever at these stores because there's nothing you can do about it. You have nowhere else to go. The coal companies back in those days were soulless and evil. Some may still be to a certain extent today, but that's what unions were created for. So that helps the miners. But anyhow, that's what company script is, if you were wondering. So for the miners at Fraterville mine, they were a lot better off than other miners. E.C. Camp, the owner of the mine, wanted to create a peaceful community of miners that maintained a brotherhood amongst itself. Thus, he decided to use the word freighter in the name of the mine, as the word for Latin origin means brother. The Fraterville mine was one of the first in the world to adopt this concept, and it drew in many miners. Additionally, Camp allowed his miners to use their wages on anything they wanted, unlike other mine owners that forced miners to use the script and live in their rental housing. The mining engineers in Coal Creek had read newspaper reports about explosions involving methane gas deep in mines in Dayton, Tennessee, but they weren't worried about the Fraterville mine, which had been one of the safest mines in the state since it opened in 1870. The furnace was not fired from Saturday until Monday morning, and the ventilation was stagnated. The mine was considered to be non-gassy, although gas was known to be present in that section of the old and abandoned Knoxville Iron Company mine, into which openings had recently been made. The miners had not been in the mine more than an hour when at 7:20 thick smoke and dust were seen coming through the ventilating shaft from the mouth of the mine. According to Tennessee Commissioner of Labor, the Fraterville mine explosion occurred around 7:20 in the morning on May 19, 1902. The explosion shot black smoke and debris out of the mine's mouth and ventilation shaft. In fact, signs of this explosion were first seen by a group of men working at a nearby mine called the Thistle Mine. These men reportedly saw black smoke rising from the Fraterville mine and initially thought that it was coming from a ventilation furnace. But once the mine's superintendent, George Camp, E.C. Camp's son, arrived at the entrance to the mine, he discovered that the mine had collapsed and that the smoke was certainly not just from a furnace. Rescuing parties were organized and penetrated about 200 feet where they came upon the body of a victim of the after damp. They could go no further and returned to await the dispersal of the deadly gas. At 4 o'clock, a rescue corps again entered. Brattices had been destroyed, and along the main entry, the force of the explosion was terrific. Timbers and cogs placed to hold the squeeze were blown out. Mine cars, wheels, and doors were shattered, and the bodies were dismembered. In other parts of the mine, no heat or violence was shown, and suffocation had brought death to those whose bodies were found there. A barricade had been placed across 15 right entry near the heading to protect miners there from the deadly after damp. The 26 miners found there must have lived for several hours, as notes were written as late as 2 p.m. At first it was thought the gas had overcome the old mine, but later the inspectors indicated that the gas was liberated from overhanging strata by the creep that had been begun with unusual violence shortly before the explosion. The gas accumulated because of inadequate ventilation and was ignited by the open lights. Dust was thick in the mine and was blown up and burned in the explosion. No sprinkling was done. I don't even understand half of this, but basically, I just think the gas had accumulated and it kind of caught on fire. Recommendations by the mine inspector that had not been carried out there were for cleaning and enlarging airways, rebuilding brattices and doors, increasing the furnace capacity, test for gas, and removing dust. Immediately, men who were not working at the time of the explosion began trying to rescue the trapped miners, while organizing rescue efforts were quickly being put together by George Camp and a Welsh mine operator from nearby Jellicoe named Philip Francis. It soon became clear that the rescuers had to attempt to fix the mine's ventilation and get clean air back into the mine before they could go in there. George Camp led a small scout team in the entrance of the mine to see how far down they could get and ran into blockage about 2,000 feet in. Following George Camp's scouting of the situation attempt, he and his small team found thousands of people, many of whom were wives and family members of the miners, desperately trying to break into the mine from multiple locations. Safely performing rescue missions proved to be difficult because prior to the explosion, coal surrounding support beams within the mine's shafts had been removed, and the explosion caused many of these shafts to be extremely unstable. Thus, some of the shafts collapsed and rescuers had to dig through them, and others were too dangerous to travel through. George Camp requested for Philip Francis to obtain a team of experienced miners to help with the rescue missions. At a later point in time, Francis stated that he remembered arriving to the mine and seeing a great deal of confusion as families of the miners began gathering outside the mine in panic and sadness, and unorganized rescue operations were taking place. He remembered the need to both correct the errors within the ongoing rescue missions and dissolve the situation with the families. In fact, one miner who was not on shift at the time of the explosion had to be removed from the rescue missions by force because he had worked for nearly 36 hours straight attempting to remove bodies and potentially save people. Once Philip Francis and his team arrived, they organized a second rescue party that entered the mine at 4 p.m. that afternoon and used makeshift ventilating system made of cloth and creosote. They inched their way into the main shaft where they observed the destruction later reported by the commissioner. The creosote and cloth ventilation shafts worked by dissipating the toxic gases within the mine and allowed the rescuers to enter the mine on the same day of the explosion, unlike in other mine explosion cases where the rescuers were not able to begin their missions for several days. The day after the explosion, the air was much more breathable and rescue efforts went into full swing. Once the rescuers made it past the explosion site, they found the rest of the mine to still be quite stable. It appeared like all of the miners further down the mine died due to suffocation and not due to complications from the blast or debris. In fact, the rescue team discovered that 26 miners had barricaded themselves in a side passage of the mine and effectively kept most of the toxic gases away from themselves. But the longest any of these miners survived was 7 hours, and they too died from suffocation. Several miners wrote farewell messages to loved ones shortly before dying, stating they were struggling for air and encouraging their families to live right so they would meet again in heaven. The last body was removed from the mine 4 days after the explosion. Coal mining was one of the most profitable professions for men without college degree. For every position, 3 men applied because there was no welfare available. The Fraterville mine manager encouraged all male family members to work in the mine. Only 3 adult males were alive in the Fraterville community after the 1902 disaster. Family losses ranged from all of their male members to 5 brothers and 2 brother-in-laws, a father and 3 sons, and 8 cousins who all worked from the same mine. As I mentioned earlier, 26 miners had barricaded themselves in a side passage. They lived several hours before they suffocated. It had been known for hundreds of years that the coal mine explosions emit poisonous gases like carbon monoxide, so miners try to find a room in the mine where the air is good and build a barricade to keep out the poisonous gases. Unfortunately, if rescuers don't get there in time, these individuals will suffocate as the oxygen in the air is depleted, but at least they have hours rather than minutes to survive. The rescue crew entering the Fraterville mine located a barricade, broke it down, and entered the confined space. They found 26 deceased miners. 10 of those miners had written farewell letters to the crew that the crew collected and gave to the families. Most of these messages were created on paper or pieces of slate, but a few were written directly on the mine's walls. A couple of these letters were not discovered for some time as the miners had placed them in their pockets, and the messages were not found until their pockets were checked. Additionally, the contents of some of the letters have not become public information for privacy reasons or because they were lost. But let's go over some of these letters because I thought they were interesting, so I think you will too, I hope. J.L. Vow opened his notebook and wrote to Sarah Ellen, his wife and mother, to their 6 children. One child, 14-year-old Elbert, was by his side in the mine. Ellen, darling, goodbye for us both. Elbert said the Lord has saved him. We are all praying for air to support us, but it is getting so bad without any air. Ellen, I want you to live right and come to heaven. Raise the children the best you can. Oh, how I wish to be with you. Goodbye. Bury me and Albert in the same grave by little Eddie. Goodbye, Ellen. Goodbye, Lily. Goodbye, Jemmy. Goodbye, Horace. We are together. It is 25 minutes after 2. There is a few of us yet alive. And Jake and Albert, oh God, one more breath. Ellen, remember me as long as you live. Goodbye, darling. Next is John Herndon. My darling mother and sister, I'm going to heaven. I want you all to meet me in heaven. Tell all your friends to meet me there, and tell your friends that I have gone to heaven. Tell my friends not to worry about me, as I am now inside of heaven. Tell Father to pay all I owe, and for you to stay there at home at my house and bury me at Pleasant Hill, if it suits you all. Bury me in black clothes. This is about 1:30 o'clock Monday. So goodbye, dear father and mother and friends. Goodbye, your boy and brother. From Henry Beach, Alice, do the best you can. I'm going to rest. Goodbye, dear. Jacob Vow, to my wife and baby, my dear wife and baby, I want you to go back home and take the baby there. So goodbye. I'm going to heaven, and so meet me there. James A. Brooks, to everybody, I have found the Lord. Do change your way of living. God be with you. No name. To George Hudson's wife, if I don't see you anymore, bury me in the clothing I have. I want you to meet me in heaven. Goodbye. Do as you wish. George Hudson. Dear wife and children, my time has come. I trust in Jesus. He will save. It is now 10 minutes before 10 o'clock Monday morning, and we are almost smothered. May God bless you and the children, and may we all meet in heaven. Goodbye till we meet to part no more. Powell Harmon. And this last one, I'm not sure who it was from, but it says, to my boys, never work in coal mines. Henry and you, Condi, be good boys and stay with your mother and live for Jesus. So, I suppose these gave their wives and children some sort of closure, which the other families of those killed didn't get. But also, I don't know. I feel like this will be hard too. I just don't know. It's such a sad situation. This makes me almost want to cry. I don't know if y'all heard of the old Bee Gees song, New York Mining Disaster 1941, but the whole time I've been doing this episode, that song's been running through my mind. It was actually based on a coal mining accident in Wales in the 1960s, but they thought New York sounded better for the song. But the lyrics, I think, are eerily similar to what happened with these men. And it goes, and I won't sing it, I'm just going to say it. You don't want to hear me sing it. In the event of something happening to me, there is something I would like you all to see. It's just a photograph of someone that I knew. Have you seen my wife, Mr. Jones? Do you know what it's like on the outside? Don't go talking too loud, you'll cause a landslide, Mr. Jones. I keep straining my ears to hear a sound. Maybe someone is digging underground. Or have they given up and all gone home to bed, thinking those who once existed must be dead? So, I don't know if you heard the song or not. I'm going to try to post it on the Facebook page so you can hear it. I also heard a newer version of it by Chumbawamba, the band that sang I Get Knocked Down, but I Get Up Again. But it's really beautiful and ethereal, so I might post it too, because it's just kind of really haunting, I think. But let's get back to the disaster and the aftermath. Besides approaching the largest mine disaster in the country, the Fraterville blast wiped out entire households and families of men. James Webb suffered the deaths of 2 sons, 3 grandsons, 2 nephews, and 2 sons-in-law. One woman lost 5 sons and 2 sons-in-law in the explosion. Mrs. Dizern, first name unknown, lost 5 sons. Cord, John, Samuel, David, and George were all killed. George Dizern's identification was a matter of controversy and mistake. A body was identified as his early on and buried. Then 2 days later, another body was positively identified as his. Well, if that man is George Dizern, who's the man we buried Thursday? A miner asked. Another time, 2 arms and a leg were recovered and buried without identification. Then a few days later, a trunk of a boy with only 1 leg attached was found. The remains of little Johnny Wallace were then reunited with the previously buried parts. Many families lost more than one of their men. The list of dead shows 4 Adkinses, 2 Allens, 3 Allreds, 3 Bennetts, 4 Brookses, 3 Chapmans, 4 Childresses, 3 Coopers, 4 Evanses, 3 Elliots, 4 Greens, 2 Goodmans, 2 Goinses, 3 Hightowers, 2 Hinderns, 3 Hewsons, Hudson's? I'm not sure. I'm sorry. 3 hat makers, 2 Leinerts, 3 Leaches, 3 Millers, 3 McCameys, 2 McGees, 2 Murrays, 2 Orbans, 2 Pittmans, 5 Reynoldses, 2 Riggses, 2 Robertses, 2 Stansberrys, 3 Smiths, 2 Smitties, 6 Sharps, 4 Slovers, 2 Vandergriffs, 4 Wilsons, 2 Wittens, 2 Webbers, 2 Witts, 3 Webbs, and 2 Woodses. 2 well-known area coal mining families suffered the highest loss. The Vowles lost 7 and the Wallaces lost 8. Recovery missions lasted for many days as lines of family and miners waited outside the entrance of the Fraterville mine in order to identify each body that was extracted. After the first day, most people lost hope of their loved ones being alive, but they still wanted to be able to identify bodies. Additionally, it was unknown exactly how many men were in the mine. So the recovery expeditions continued for a long time in an attempt to ensure all of the dead miners were found. The cause of the explosion was a matter of controversy. The report issued by the Tennessee Commissioner of Labor stated that the explosion occurred when volatile gases that had accumulated because of inadequate ventilation were ignited by an open light. While the report stated that the shutdown of the mine's ventilation system over the previous weekend had allowed the dangerous buildup of the gases, ventilation furnace operator Tip Hightower was acquitted of negligence at a subsequent inquest. The report also suggested the gases had leaked into the Fraterville mine from an adjacent, abandoned, and unventilated mine once operated by the Knoxville Iron Company. Along with Hightower, Superintendent George Camp was also charged with negligence, but was acquitted after several hours of tearful testimony. The explosion left over 1,200 widows and fatherless children. All of Anderson County, especially the communities of Briceville, Fraterville, and Cold Creek, was affected. Some of the miner victims were old enough to have fought in the Civil War. Others were mere boys, 13, 14, and 15 years old. The mine reopened shortly. Many lawsuits were filed. The mine owner and superintendent were indicted on misdemeanor charges, but none of these meant anything to any of the families who lost their husbands, fathers. But none of this meant anything to the families who lost their husbands, fathers, and sons, along with their sources of livelihood. There was no Social Security or workers' compensation. Children's mothers and wives had to depend on other family members who had suffered equal losses. Newspaper coverage of the Fraterville mine explosion sparked a public outcry over coal mine safety. Congress established the U.S. Bureau of Mines in 1910. Its mission was to improve mine safety. The Bureau required rescue crews to wear self-contained breathing apparatuses and recommend that the crews start using a canary in a cage to test air quality in mines. A canary will die long before a human if there's bad air in the mine, Thacker said. The Bureau of Mines was first able to test its safety measures on December 9, 1911, when the Cross Mountain mine in Briceville exploded. Many of the miners of Fraterville were buried in Leach Cemetery, also known as the Fraterville Miners' Circle, in Coal Creek, now Rocky Top. The Fraterville Miners' Circle was placed on the U.S. National Register in Historic Places in 2005. Additionally, some miners were buried in Longfield Cemetery in Rocky Top. Today, the mine entrance to Fraterville is grown over with brush. Mining is mainly done on the surface now. No one is alive who witnessed this tragedy. In cemeteries in and around Lake City, people who visit point and wonder at the number of grave markers that bear the same date of May 19, 1902. These poor mothers and families. Can you imagine losing all those men at once? I don't know how they made it. But if we know anything about Appalachian people, it's that they step in and help each other out no matter what. I'm sure it was the same then it is now, probably even more so. Thank goodness for good neighbors. So I guess that's about it for today's episode. Growing up in mining country, these always hit home for me. As I mentioned before, my dad was a coal miner for a bit, but primarily did road construction, so luckily he never went underground. But none of it's without risks, really. So just say a prayer for all the miners out there, I suppose. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. As always, thank you for listening. You can follow me on social media under Poison Appalachia. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Lemonade, TikTok, Blue Sky, and YouTube. If you could, on the podcast platform you listen to, could you please like and rate me and share me, please? Let's just keep getting the word out about this podcast. Thanks, y'all, and have a great week. Bye.